I'm Cliff, and this is my garage. My first HPDE is this weekend, so I'm putting new brake pads on the Cayman. Hey, welcome back to the garage. And if this is your first time joining me, thanks for dropping by. My first high performance driver education event is coming up, and there's a lot to do in getting the Cayman ready. Today, I'm going to replace the brake pads. Now, my brake pads are not worn out. In fact, they're only about 50% worn. But the two parts on your car that really get worn on in an HPDE are the tires and the brake pads. And the last thing I want to do is finish wearing out my brake pads at the track and having to either change them or stop participating in the HPDE. So I'm going to put on a brand new set of pads just to give myself that extra peace of mind, and I'll keep the worn out set as an emergency get the car home set. One thing I'm not doing is putting on high performance racing brake pads. For one thing, it's my first HPDE and I'm not going to be pushing the car that hard. Also, racing brake pads run around $350 to $500 or more, and there's just no sense in doing that for my first HPDE. There's also the fact that racing brake pads are not good for the street, so I'd have to swap them back out again. So I just went with the normal OEM Techstar brake pads. Porsches come with pretty good brake systems, and the stock pads are going to be plenty good enough for this HPDE. So today's brake pad change is just going to be like a normal brake job. One thing that is a little different is rather than getting the pads from an ordinary store like Advance Auto or Amazon, I went with a company called FCP Euro. FCP Euro is a bit unusual. They sell all the regular parts you would need for your Porsche, but they all come with a lifetime warranty, even for wear items like brake pads. And when they do wear out, all you have to do is order a new set and then send the old ones back for a full refund. I'm assuming you still have to pay shipping both to you and back, but that's still a heck of a bargain. Quite honestly, not sure how they're going to stay in business. I'm assuming that their business model is based around the fact that most people don't keep a car long enough to go through one or two sets of brake pads or like two water pumps and that kind of stuff. So good on them. Good luck to them. Okay, let's get the Cayman up on the lift and get this done. If you've got a car that uses wheel bolts instead of lug nuts or lug bolts, whatever you want to call them, do yourself a favor and get a pair of these hanging studs. It makes your life so much easier. Just take off the two upper bolts, put those in. Now you remove the other bolt, and you don't have to worry about the thing or the wheel falling off on you. Just pull it right off. And when you're done, you don't have to fight with trying to get the bolt holes lined up and everything and getting it onto the centering hub. You just get it onto those studs and you're ready to go. You can get a pair of these in the specific size for your car, or you can get a full set that covers a wide variety of cars. I've got the full set, but like I said, you can just get them in pairs. I forget exactly what the correct size is. I'll put a link here in the video, or put the correct size in the video, and I'll give you a link to the ones that I use down in the description below. First thing we want to do is turn the wheel all the way to the right. So we push the brake caliper, the back of the brake caliper out, and that makes life a whole lot easier. Okay, so just some quick anatomy here. This is your brake caliper, of course. Here's your two brake fluid bleed plugs, drain plugs, whatever you want to call them. Here's your pads. These are I think these are like vibration dampers. They're hanging these round things hanging out here. The pads are right there and there, and they're held in with this spring and this pin. The pin holds the spring in, and the pin is held in with this little spring pin here. Now, and this here is the brake wear sensor wire. The Porsche recommends that you replace the spring, the spring pin, and the brake sensor whenever you change the brake pads. To be honest, that's a little excessive, and I don't plan to do that. Now, if the brake sensor, you may or may not have to change that. The way these things work is that, and you'll see them a little better in a minute. But there's like a little flat piece down in there, and as the brake pad wears out, these pieces move closer and closer to the rotor. And when they make contact, it starts actually wearing on that sensor, and it essentially breaks a circuit. The little plug is right up here. The wires come in and they form a circuit, and the car's computer is monitoring that circuit. And as long as that circuit is complete, it knows that everything is fine. But when it wears down and it rubs the surface off of that sensor and breaks that connection, then it knows that the pads need to be replaced, and you're going to get that warning light on your dash. Now, if you change the pads before that warning light comes on, that means the sensor itself has not been triggered. And so you really don't need to replace it, because if it breaks, well, then the break in that circuit triggers the warning light. Like I said, I don't see any point in replacing them unless you just want to. They're not that expensive. They're about $8 a piece, one for each corner. And keep in mind that there is a specific part number for the front left brake wear sensor. There's a different part number, I presume a different part for the right front brake sensor, and a third part number, and these are different from the front ones. There's a different shape and everything to the rear sensors, but they're both the same. But like I said, I'm not going to replace that wire. The only time I think you really would have to, if you didn't trigger the sensor, is that and I've done this before, I've broken the sensor getting it out of there. All right, step one, pair of needle nose pliers. Get in here and pull this pin. Be careful, don't want to scratch up the pretty brake caliper. So, good Lord, there it went. All right, I see it. So be careful of that. That's the first time I've had that happen. And I'm just going to I have my handy magnetic parts tray. These things are a lifesaver. Highly recommend them. I'll give you a link in the video description as usual. All right, so we've gotten that pin out of there. Now this rod is free. Well, it's theoretically free to slide back and forth. And we're going to use a punch to drive it out this way. So I'm just using a punch and a ball peen hammer to knock it out. And it can be a little stubborn coming out of there. Now, I don't have the best punch in the world because it's tapered. I don't have a nice thin one. I need to get one, because the problem is that after a certain point, the hole is too small for it to continue on. But it gets it most of the way before it starts jamming, and then I can kind of go over the top here and finish driving it out. Now, do be careful. This spring is loaded, and so when you just kind of try and ease it off the other side. Okay, there we go. Like I said, sometimes this thing is just so hard to get out. And there it goes across the floor. That happens all the time. You can see it's kind of cruddy and corroded. I can see where, it might not be a bad idea to replace it, but I'm just going to go over here and use the wire wheel to clean this up.
A few moments later.
There, that's much better. I can see where, when a Porsche mechanic is doing this, the service manual is written for them, and they're not going to take the time to clean these things up and replace them. They're just going to go grab a new one and charge you for it. Now, there are two ways of attacking this. One is to get the brake sensors loose and the spring and everything comes out as one unit. The other way, which is what I prefer to do, is just get the wire off of the spring. I just took and used the Needle nose pliers just kind of get around it and pull the spring up as I pulled it down. Now you can just kind of slide the spring to the side, and you can see the brake sensor right there. I like to get hold of it with the needle nose pliers, one on each side, and just pull, wiggle, and pull straight up. There. And this is the wear surface I was talking about. When that gets rubbed away, it triggers the sensor. Now, what I've had happen before is getting it out is that this little tab here can snap off. So it's, even if you're not going to replace the sensors, it's not a bad idea to have a set on hand in case you ever do break one. Just get the spring out of there. Same thing. It's a little clearer. You can see, I think, how I'm getting hold of this and pulling it out. Come on. This one's being stubborn. Huh. I don't normally have that much trouble with these things. There. And you pull out a little clip there. Yeah, this is kind of hard to get a camera on, so I've grabbed the GoPro, and if you're going to be replacing the sensor wire, it's held in place by the rubber piece that covers the bleeder valve. So you just pop that off, and now the wire comes right out. And the last bit is it's plugged into this housing, and there are two little clips. You can see one right there, and there's another on the other side. And so really it's easiest, boy, this is hard to do one-handed. You got to loosen, pull each way. If you use two fingers, it's a whole lot easier, but loosen it up, and then you grab and just pull and wiggle on this connection. Make sure you're pulling the right one. And so hard to do holding a camera. And now the whole thing just comes right loose. When you're putting it back in, just, of course, my goodness, so hard to do with one hand, especially my left hand. All right, that was impossible to do one-handed, so to reinstall it, you saw what the thing looks like. Just slide it into place. Make sure you get it seated completely in there. Push the cover back down. Lay the sensor wire into that little rubber loop and put the cap back on. Oh, and by the way, if you're looking for some great work gloves, I'm always recommending these things because I really, really like them. It's these Pug work gloves. They last for a long time, and they're like $1.20 a pair. You buy them in a pack of 5 or 10. I forget what it is, but I love these things. They're great. They have a rubber coated palm and fingers, but the back is ventilated so you don't overheat. And it's so much better than any other gloves. They're nice and tight and thin, so you don't lose your sense of tactile feedback when you're trying to hold something. Just really great. I'll give you a link in the description below, as usual. So now that we've got the retaining spring and sensor wire and everything out of the way, we can remove the brake pads, or we could, except the car has a death grip on them. And of course, it's because we've been using the brakes, and as I came into the garage, I stepped on the brakes, and just the pads are tightly down onto the rotor. Now, you can get a pad spreader, or brake pad spreader. It's a tool that's specially designed to go in here and spread these pads apart by pushing back on the calipers. And, you know, they're great. If I wanted to blow $50 on one, you know, I could, but I hate buying special purpose tools. There are cheaper ones, and just if you want to do that, it's fine. I find that what works pretty much just as well is a big pair of channel lock pliers, and this is a tool you can use all over the place. Just I'm going to use. I don't normally use a piece of paper towel like this, but in this case, I got these nice shiny painted calipers, so I'm going to protect them. So I'm going to get hold of it and just squeeze, and I'm pushing the calipers back, pushing the brake fluid back into the line. And Sometimes, well, a lot of times you'll see a video on changing brakes where they're telling you, oh, you need to go pull fluid out of the reservoir because you don't want to overflow it. Well, in my experience, when you're doing it one caliper at a time, there's no danger of overflowing the reservoir. You're not pushing that much fluid back up in there. And this is going to be perfectly fine. Just do this entire caliper, get it pumped back up, get the fluid pumped back down in here, clamping down these pads, and then move on to the next one. If you're going to do all four calipers, you're going to push them all back at the same time, then you might have an issue with fluid overflow, but just don't do it that way. Okay, so we've got the pad loose, and once I've got it pulled back, I can go in here also and use a screwdriver to finish off, make sure I've got it pushed back as far as I can. Okay. And the pad will not come out. And the reason for this is that there is a vibration dampener or damper that goes into goes into the calipers, and it is glued to the pad. And that's why Porsche says you need to replace that vibration dampener, or I keep calling it a dampener, that vibration damper whenever you replace the brakes. Again, I don't really see the point in doing that. And we'll just, I'll show you how to get around the adhesive part. These dampers come with the damper. The damper comes with like an adhesive on it. You pull off the protective film when you put it in, and then you put the brake pad in and squeeze it together, and that's how it glues. But with that damper stuck to the pad, there is no way to get the pad out. And the reason is that my brake pads are not all that worn out, and so they can't move far enough. In this case, I can just get in here with a screwdriver, get under that pad, and just break the glue. A little more. Oh, I didn't get this bottom end. Okay, there. Now the pad will come on out. Let me just show you what that vibration damper looks like. So we're going to need to get it out anyway. Just use a pair of pliers, needle nose to pull it on out. There. And you can see where the glue is on there. Once again, just took and cleaned this up on the wire wheel just to get the old adhesive off of there. And now we're going to replace it by using CRC Disc Brake Quiet. And what this will act as an adhesive to glue the new brake pad to this damper. Now, before you put it back in, make sure you've got these are two slightly different sizes. The big ones to the top, so keep that in mind. Just gonna put this on here. Just spreading it around. Checking carefully. I've got the large one to the top. I just carefully maneuver this in there. Be careful not to get the brake quiet onto the caliper. Sure, it generally wouldn't hurt anything if you did, but I just really try not to. Okay, that damper's back in place. New brake pad. Weird thing I've noticed about these Techstar brake pads, they smell terrible. Ugh. Okay, make sure you got the vibration dampers or whatever these things are to the outside. You can't really get this raw. There isn't a top or a bottom really. They kind of, as long as you face the pad material towards the rotor, you're fine. Just slide this in place. and we're good to go. You just repeat that process with the other caliper. If I don't know if you saw that movement, but when I pushed on this one back, these calipers popped back out and are now pushing all of this together. Get that back in place. It's not a super tight fit like it was before, but it has pushed them out. That's why you do these completely one at a time. And okay, this came right out. Looks like we might have an adhesive failure. And I guess that's what's happened here. It almost, it almost looks like these things come with the adhesive applied to them, and then there's a clear film over them. It almost looks like somebody put this in without removing the film. It's okay. I'm not sure, but that is sure what that looks like. I'm going to go clean this up now. I noticed this damper has quite a bit of corrosion on it. I cleaned up what I could. I presume that's from having lived the first 8 years of its life in Illinois and Pennsylvania. Probably just road salts causing that. So I think the next time I do the brakes, I'm going to go ahead and replace these the way Porsche recommends. Just using a large screwdriver to push these caliper pistons back. They do tend to pop back and forth, but they'll actually back off. Ooh, almost dropped it. Again, making sure that the large pieces to the top. Carefully slide this in. And now you can insert the new pad. All right, new pads are in place. I'm going to go ahead and go around and pump on the brake pedal to get these things clamped back in. I don't want to drop the car off the lift or drop the car back down or try and climb into it. So I'm just using about a 3-foot 2x4 to reach in and pump the brakes. All right, good, and clamp down again. So now we just reverse the whole process. And you can see again that little piece, right? That little knob, boss, whatever you want to call it. It fits into that slot. You can hear it click into place. It's got a spring on it. Okay. Put the spring back into place. Make sure you've got the little clip here down. And this is probably the hardest part of the whole job, is getting this wire back into this clip or getting a new sensor wire into that clip. So I just take and bend it a little bit. It's going to make your life so very much easier. And then we're going to take and put the sensor, make sure you get it. You can see a little boss there. It's slightly larger on this side. So basically the brake pad is sliding between this piece and this piece. Make sure you get it in the right position. It kind of slides and snaps into place. And I'm going to take this punch and put that spring back down. Bit tedious, but it gets there. Okay. Got it all in the right position. We take the pin, and here's something truly critical, is the little tiny hole where the spring pin goes. Make sure you've got that showing, coming straight out when you put the pin back in, so that you have a place to put the little retention spring. This is a bit of a pain also. You got to push, get it in position, and you're going to push this in. And the easiest way to do that is with the rod you've already been using. Just put it in there and pry up, or pry this end back this way. I got it out of alignment. There. See how much easier that's going in than when it came out? Last step is to put this little spring pin back in place. Just get it in your needle nose pliers like that. Hopefully that's in focus. And get it lined up and just tap it home with a hammer. And we're all done with the front left. As you can imagine, the front right is the same as the front left, but reversed, so no point in doing that on video. Again, I'm going to use my wheel hanger studs. These rear wheels and tires are so much heavier than the fronts. Changing the rear pads is essentially exactly the same as the front pads. Grabbing hold of that little spring there, pulling it out, drive out the pin. This is really kind of a pain. You know, you can't turn this out the way you did on the front one, and so trying to change these without getting in the way of the camera is proving challenging. The back sensors are a little different shape, but they clip in essentially the same way. Again, just reach in here carefully, grabbing with each side with the needle nose pliers, and just wiggling and pulling up. Okay, they're normally not this stubborn. Okay. Here we go. You see how they're, and this is a little bit tricky. You see how this piece here on the end, it's the wire continues, and there's a hole in the brake pad. I'll try to remember to show that to you, but there's actually a hole in the brake pad where that tucks into. Grabbing the second one over here. Come on. Wow. These are here. Okay. And let me finish driving that pin out. Now, one major difference between the front and rear is the design of the vibration dampers. On the rear, it's these two individual little pads here that are glued on. And if your brakes are not worn enough and you can't get it to clear these holes, these are a bit more of a pain to get loose than the front ones. In fact, that's why a lot of times you'll see people doing videos on changing out the brakes on the Cayman. They will actually remove the entire caliper and remove them from the back side. It's not really necessary. It just takes a little patience to get in there with a screwdriver and just wedge the screwdriver up under there and pop them loose. Just be careful you're not actually digging in underneath this plate here. It's an easy mistake to make, where you're digging this plate off of the pad back instead of getting the vibration damper plate. Like the fronts, I'm going to reuse these vibration dampers. There's no need to replace these. So I just put some of that brake quiet adhesive on there. These are a little trickier to get in than the front ones. So what I do is I just reach in there, get it aligned, holding it with the needle nose pliers, and then use a screwdriver to just reach in and push it into position. Get it aligned, and then push it home. And that's good. Do be aware that, like the front, there is a large one and a small one, and on here the small one is on the top. Now that the dampers are in place, just like before, carefully insert the brake pad, kind of holding it against the rotor to keep it away from the gluey surfaces. And just get it into position, and we're good to go. If you do get a little bit on the rotor in here, don't fight with trying to clean it up here. Just turn the rotor and clean it out here. So once again, we're going to use the GoPro to get a look at how the sensor is routed, the sensor wire is routed. It goes back through this little clip right here. It's actually fitted around this brake line, and then the other end of it pops loose, and then the wire comes out of there. Then the wire goes around through the back there and loops through this. Let's see if we can get a look at it. This thing right here. And if you're changing it, this just pops out of that wire holder there. And you would take and put the new one back in the same place. Just like, come on, that. Then it comes around here to the same connector here where you would have the two clips on each side. You would pop those loose and flip this up and then pull and replace the sensor wire. So, fun fact, if you don't want to bother with these sensors anymore, you can just take these two wires, just cut this whole thing loose, just take the two wires and solder them together and put like heat shrink around them. That makes the circuit permanent. It can't be broken. And if you plug this back in now, the Cayman will always think your brakes are just fine. Of course, now it's upon you to make sure that you don't run your pads to metal. But you can do that if you like. Now, there's that little hole that I was talking about in the pad. And that's where this little stub thing fits into when you're putting the brake sensors back into position. So make sure you get it in there correctly. Okay. Just take it and get that thing in there, that little stubby thing, and then snap the brake, the wear sensor into the pad, and get that wire tucked in on there. Might as well go ahead and put the spring in place. Get the wire tucked in, and then put the other sensor in position again, making sure you get the that little piece into that hole. There. Make sure you hear that definite snap when it goes into position. All right, sensor wires in place, springs in place. And now, just like on the front, just put our punch in. Use it to press down the spring. Make sure we get our hole in the right position. Oh, wait, I never went and cleaned this up. I'll be right back. Okay, much better. press the spring, slide this into place, making sure that our hole is pointed out that way. What's going on here? There. Then last, but definitely not least, we put the pin back in. All that's left to do is pump the caliper back down and closed up, and then move on. Okay, all finished. The only thing left to do is take the car out for a little test drive, make sure everything seems to be working right. And then probably tomorrow, and I'll do this in a separate video, I'll need to bed the brake pads, which is a process of initializing the brake pads. It's not totally necessary, but since I am going to be pushing on the pads pretty hard this weekend, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I tend to bed the pads anyway. It doesn't take long, and it's really a good idea. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, liking, and sharing my videos. Now, before you go, please go down there, find that thumbs up button, give me a like on the video. It really, really helps with YouTube's algorithm for suggesting videos. Also, if you're not one of my almost 3,000 subscribers, please go down there, find that big red subscribe button, give it a click. Doesn't cost a thing, doesn't hurt a bit. And if you want to keep up with everything I'm doing here in the garage, including the Cayman projects, both performance and aesthetic modifications, my HBDE experience and video of my actual track days. I plan to do several of them this year. In addition to things like improvements to the garage, DIY projects around the house, just all manner of things, whatever I'm working on at the time, go find that bell icon, click on it, and that will turn on notifications for this channel. That way, YouTube will let you know every time that I post a new video from here in Cliff's Garage. I'll see you next time.